Consider supporting the work of Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian by becoming a monthly patron. Your contributions will help keep the resource alive and support its mission. Visit patreon.com/NAHblog to learn more and make a contribution of $3, $5, $10, or $20 per month. Again, that's patreon.com/NAHblog. You can start or stop anytime. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian podcast. I'm your host, Relando Tompkins-Jones. I'm a social worker, social justice educator, writer, organizational consultant, and now podcaster who works to build more equitable and inclusive communities. I am also an aspiring humanitarian. My experiences have shown me that in the process of working for social justice outwardly, it's also important for us to continue to critically examine ourselves, shedding attitudes and behaviors that are oppressive to make room for those that are more inclusive, just, and humanitarian. What is an aspiring humanitarian, you ask? When I say humanitarian, I don't mean humanitarian in the harmful sense of placing ourselves in the role of a benevolent hero who's there to swoop in and save others. I mean dedicating one's life, time, and energy to honoring the ways that our destinies are intertwined. It's about accepting the lifelong pursuit to become more humane to those around us, with the recognition that we lose important parts of our humanity when we allow and enable the suffering of others. It means acknowledging our many contradictions and complications and aspiring to do more, aspiring to do better. It means acknowledging that systems of oppression exist by design and not by accident, and working towards an individual and collective transformation that includes an unshakable belief that our society's safety, viability, survival, and ability to thrive is only as secure as our most marginalized community members. Since 2011, my blog, Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian, has been a place where I've written and curated content on issues of equity and social justice. Through using written word, film, and video, and other forms of media for social justice education, I hope to continue to expand and enrich the narratives about social issues that face our society and to find ways to take action while encouraging others to do the same. Today, the blog and now the podcast is for others who share a passion for that same journey. No matter who you are, where you come from, what your identities are, or what area of work you're in, there's room enough for all of us in this work, and I hope that engaging with the podcast or the blog can move you closer to discovering or reaffirming your answers to the questions that you may have about how you can best be of service. Thank you for choosing the Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian podcast. I'm your host, Relando Tompkins-Jones. We're going to be talking about getting in our own way. So what I mean by that, getting in our own way, I'm going to be talking about barriers that are of our own making, which result in limiting our ability to really work for social change, limiting our ability to really work for social justice. Okay, so getting in our own way is the topic of this week's episode. So when I'm talking about getting in our own way, I'm going to be talking about two of those barriers, and those barriers are egocentrism and ethnocentrism. So egocentrism and ethnocentrism. But before I get into that, I want to acknowledge power dynamics because power dynamics are important. Identity matters, power matters, and it's important. So to be clear here, when I'm talking about getting in our own way, when I'm talking about barriers of our own making, I am not talking about the level of awareness that we have to have from the aspect of the marginalized identities that we hold, that people from oppressed groups have to have, and the assumptions that we have to make about those who are in power in relation to ourselves, depending on our identity. So, for example, I'm not talking about the dynamics that, or the things that people of color have to navigate and experience in relation to a structurally racist system. I'm not talking about the moves that folks in the LGBTQI plus community have to make in relation to a cissexist, heterosexist system. It's not about, placing blame on marginalized people for the oppression that they experience and saying that they need to change in some way. When I'm talking about power dynamics here and getting in our own way, I'm talking about the assumptions we make from our places of privilege that ultimately serve to reinforce the messages about our superiority from in those privileged identities, and allows us to be complicit and complacent with the oppression of others. So, when I'm talking about getting in our own way, I'm focused on our privileged identities and how we then can create barriers of our own making that limit us from taking part in social change. So, the first barrier that I'm going to discuss here is egocentrism. So, egocentrism refers to the ways in which we put ourselves at the center of the universe. In developmental psychology, it often refers to a stage in development where young children can have difficulty understanding that there are realities that are different from the ones that they're currently experiencing, believing that other people experience the world in the same ways that they do. While this term is often discussed in terms of Piaget's stages of cognitive development, as if children can graduate from this way of thinking, there are many ways that we as adults still struggle with the reality that not everyone in the world experiences life in the exact same ways as we do, or believes the same things as we do, values what we value, dislikes what we dislike, or like what we like. And we can make all kinds of assumptions that aren't necessarily true because of that. So occasionally in my work as a social justice educator, I do workshops where I often ask participants to identify different narratives that are based in egocentrism. And so I'm just going to share three different narratives that have come up in different instances when I've asked for some submissions for that. And so one example of a narrative is, hey, we all know that my religion needs to be the foundation of our society. It's impossible to have a moral compass without it. Nothing else could prevent us from destroying each other. Another example of a statement rooted in egocentrism is the belief that heterosexual two-parent households are the only models for raising a family. And this, said and thought of in a way that, of course, everybody knows that. Another example is this idea of meritocracy, right? So when my great grandparents came to this country, all they had was a dollar and a dream, but they became independently wealthy. They pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They didn't complain. They weren't looking for a handout. This is America, the land of equal opportunity. If you believe in yourself and you work hard, you can succeed. And that is what separates the rich from the poor. So these narratives, these explanations that put groups at the center of the universe, and the expectation is that everyone is in agreement that this explanation is the way things are. So as I've shared just a few examples, just for a moment of pause here, I just really want you to think about, like, what examples have you experienced? What narratives that were rooted in egocentrism have you heard, experienced, or even believed yourself? So just think about that. The second way that we get into our own way here is ethnocentrism. So closely aligned with believing that all others in the world experience things the same ways as we do is the belief that others should believe that our way is the superior way. So ethnocentrism can refer to the ways in which we think our culture and ways of doing things are superior to others' ways of doing and being. So combining that sense of entitlement with power and influence is how we end up with situations where legislation is proposed that involves executing people for their sexual orientation, denying them services, environments that exclude people with disabilities, structurally racist practices in housing, employment, and law enforcement, in education and healthcare and more, economic inequality, and a host of other issues and isms and systems of oppression where people are blamed for the physical, emotional, and social violence that is enacted against them. So, all of us are implicated in some ways And so it's really important to think about how we can get in our own way when it comes to really acting and getting involved and learning more about social change and progress. But before we can do that, we have to acknowledge a couple of barriers or some barriers that prevent us from doing that. And so that's what this week's episode was about. Two barriers in which we get in our own way. So egocentrism and ethnocentrism. Not everyone in the world experiences the world exactly in the ways that we do, and not everyone should. So when you combine that sort of that entitlement of thinking, everyone should do the things that we do with some power to back that up, that's how you get systems of repression. And again, it's not designed to work in reverse. So it's really important to think about that. So those were two barriers here. So egocentrism and ethnocentrism. But what are some of the other ways in which we can get in our own way from our positions of privilege? What are some of the other ways that really prevent us from engaging as we need to? So think about that and reflect on it. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To find show notes for this and additional episodes, visit podcast.notesfromanaspiringhumanitarian.com. Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian is a labor of love and will continue to be. Consider supporting the work of Notes from an Aspiring Humanitarian by becoming a monthly patron. Your contributions will help keep this resource alive and support its mission. Visit patreon.com/NAHblog to learn more and make a contribution of $3, $5, $10, or $20 per month. Again, that's patreon.com/NAHblog. You can start or stop anytime. Thank you for joining me this week. Take care.